There's no story.
All right, make one up. I mean, nobody in this town can make up a crazy story like you. You're the king of that.
There's a common line in the self-help world: don't compare yourself to someone else, compare yourself to who you were yesterday. But what if I just had a really bad month where I was just in a funk? I didn't script out a bunch of great ideas, I didn't make a bunch of cool videos. Last month's me was better than I am today. Lately I've been finding myself relating to the character of William Shakespeare, at least the avatar of that character in the movie Shakespeare in Love. The impetus for the entirety of that plot is the fact that Shakespeare is unable to write. He goes to gypsies and healers and takes on charms and spits into little trinkets in an effort to get his creativity back, but to no avail. So in the interim, Shakespeare finds himself giving into vices as a way to distract himself. Part of the problem is that by this point, he already is William Shakespeare, the writer, the legend in the making, at least a little bit. Writer's block is something I consistently struggle with now, whereas it wasn't something that I felt in the early days of my channel. Partly because in those days, I would just be stuck in a cubicle and the work was largely mindless. I mean, once I learned it, I could just do it without thinking too hard about it. And so in my downtime, I would listen to RSD Tyler videos that would go on for an hour and they'd just be these incredible rants that was entertaining to listen to while I was working. And at other times when my manager wasn't walking around, I would just script out YouTube videos, often just making list scripts based off of various topics: Machiavelli, angel numbers, the pineal gland, whatever I could think of that I thought would get views for a guy just talking. I would make that video, and for the most part, I didn't feel that much pressure. I didn't think too hard about it. These days, my inner standards have gone up so much. Many videos I make today, if I made it a year ago, I would be blown away. I would think, damn, that B-roll was amazing. This video is so good. Whereas today, if I look at it, even with all those shots and all that editing, I think it was okay. I mean, I like it, I guess, a little bit, but I'm not ecstatic. I feel that at times, but mostly it's just this overwhelm of possibilities. What should I write next? What should the next video idea be? What should we film? What's the story here? When I was recently watching Nathaniel Drew's video on how he was taking a break from YouTube, he mentioned this concept of how it's a lot of pressure, how there's, for him, 1 million eyeballs potentially on just this framing, this setup, his compositions. It's a lot of pressure to be taking on, and I definitely relate to that on a smaller scale. It's not so much that nothing comes out when I sit down to write, I always get ideas, but often when I'm in that in-between place where I'm scrolling my phone, watching other people's videos, or even watching some of my older videos, I feel like I'll never get another good idea again. And that's a miserable limbo place to be. I've been reading Seth Godin's newest book, The Practice, and it very evidently captures where I've been falling short in my thinking, and maybe how I might be able to come back. The entirety of the problem lies with thinking about the process versus the outcome. We live in an outcome-focused culture. A short-term focus on outcomes means that we decide a book is going to be good, and we decide if we're going to pick up and read it if it's on the bestseller rank. A singer is good based off of winning a TV talent show, or just having been put on by a well-known producer. Lost in this obsession with outcomes is the truth that outcomes are actually the result of process. And we can't guarantee an outcome, but we can probably readily say that a good process will more likely give us more frequent good outcomes than lousy processes. Focusing solely on the outcome forces us to make choices that are short-term, selfish, insignificant in meaning. They take our focus away from the journey and encourage us to give up early. The practice of choosing creativity is something that requires persistence, and creativity ultimately isn't an object that you look at on display. I mean, there is a bit of that, but creativity is a commitment to the process, not simply the next outcome on the list. We do our work for a reason. We want to get an outcome. There's a result that we are working towards. But if we triangulate just on the outcome, then we are lost entirely. The practice falls apart. Godin's solution to this problem that he mentions in the book is a very obvious one, which is to focus on one's practice. It's a simple concept. I have no doubt you've heard it before, but it's something that's so easy to forget. And what's interesting about what Godin lays out in his book is that we can make our own practices very individual, very catered to us. He says this: there's a practice available to each of us, the practice of embracing the process of creation in service of better. The practice is not the means to the output. The practice is the output itself, because the practice is all we can control. Creativity doesn't repeat itself, it can't. Okay, I can't look back on my last video in its entirety and think that I as a person could sit down and script that video out beginning to end. It wasn't something that I just came up with because I'm really creative. I was just working out and I listened to a certain song, and when the beat dropped in that song, I had a vision for a movie that I'd seen earlier that week. And I can see similar compositions and images in that military action movie I saw, pair it with the song, and then reflect on the fact that I've been thinking about military video ideas. I've been thinking about practices and habits from people like Jocko Willink and David Goggins.
What's the moral of the story? Don't be a fucking dick.
I can reflect and then sort of create a symphony of ideas that come together, images, compositions, and slowly, as I work each day, maybe writing a little bit, maybe shooting something that mimics the composition of Denis Villeneuve, I can slowly begin to put those pieces together, and then that ultimately might lead to something that I'm mildly proud of. A big thank you to Morning Brew for sponsoring this video. Morning Brew is a free daily newsletter you get from Monday to Saturday, which gets you up to speed on business news in just 5 minutes. As someone who wants to keep developing and advancing his career in the tech space, this is actually a news source that I look forward to, unlike, I don't know, other places where the media is just much more bleak. Morning Brew, on the other hand, is witty, relevant, informative, useful to my broader understanding of the world without being too dreary. This week I learned that the markets went up, at least at the time of this filming. The NASDAQ is looking good, which probably means I should spend more time learning about investments. I also learned that jobless claims went down for the 4th week straight. Unemployment has fallen to 6.9%, signs that workers might be finding new roles or that the economy is really aggressively adapting to remote work. Part of this has probably been the result of the COVID vaccine reveal and the work on that. It'll be interesting to watch these developments, but this is certainly the kind of news that I want to see in my feed. There's no reason not to subscribe to Morning Brew if you're interested in business, finance, or tech. It's completely free and it takes less than 15 seconds to subscribe. Click the link in the description below to subscribe to Morning Brew today. Cheers. The Bhagavad Gita says, it is better to follow your own path, however imperfectly, than to follow someone else's perfectly. Consider the people who have a real voice and they make a real impact. Their path is always different. We might look back on their work and think, damn, Denis Villeneuve really is a genius. That's all there is to it. But I have no doubt that even he relies on a practice. Otherwise, just having that pressure on you of being a filmmaker genius, now go make something great, it would be too much. You need a system. You need that practice that stabilizes you, that makes you feel sure of yourself. Do you have a creative hero? Someone who regularly leads, creates, and connects? Perhaps they're a dancer, a recording artist, a rapper, or a famous Hollywood director. To every field of endeavor, some people stand out as the makers of what's next, as the voices of what is now, of the coolest shit that's happening right now. With few exceptions, the careers and working processes of every one of these artists are similar. Their output is different, the medium, the environment, their timing is different. I almost killed my videographer there. But they all come back to their practice. The practice remains. We can adopt a practice as well. Essentially, the practice is the ultimate safeguard against attachment to the outcome, against perfectionism, because you don't have to be perfect. You simply have to honor the practice. And in that aggregate of doing that daily practice, whatever it may be in your terrain, it ultimately leads to something that you can look at and say, I did that. Honoring the practice really is my tagline for the upcoming year, because despite the quality of my work being better than it's ever been, and I know I'm inherently just someone who's going to want to get better, want to continually criticize and scrutinize and try to improve, I'm someone who's relentlessly disappointed in my work. So I'm trying now not to trust my own judgment of it and let that block me. I'm striving and reminding myself to just keep up the practice. Because for those of us who focus on the system more than our goals, honoring our practices above perfectionism, to us I say, greatness is coming.